Could the Oklahoma Sooners end up landing a trio of brothers across the next several recruiting cycles? Let's figure out who those guys are. Coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday on the KRF Sports app from 9 to noon. And this baseball season with the Oklahoma Sooners, you'll be hearing him filling in for Toby Rowland from time to time throughout the spring. Congrats, Josh, on the gig and the opportunity, man. That's really exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's obviously a big time thrill, and we can talk a little bit more about how round one went before too long here on Locked On Sooners. But no, it's been really cool. I'm just keeping the seat warm for the greatest in the business, which is Toby Rowland. But obviously, it's a unique, incredible opportunity with what looks like it's going to be a fun team this spring.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if we have a few more solo shows with just myself, it's not because Josh has gone away. It's because he's got a great opportunity calling Oklahoma baseball from time to time this spring. So again, we're excited for my man Josh here. But hey, some other exciting things coming down on the recruiting side of things for Oklahoma, and every episode and every segment on recruiting here on the Locked On Network is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, terms and conditions apply. But so Michigan transfer safety Keon Sabb entered the portal just the other day. And on that same day, the Oklahoma Sooners offered Amari Sabb and Xavier Sabb. This is a trio of brothers. And what's the Oklahoma connection here? Okay, so Keon Sabb, Michigan safety, was committed to Brent Venables and the Clemson Tigers, obviously Dabo Swinney as well, back in the 2022 recruiting cycle. Just a few days after Brent Venables took the job at Oklahoma, Keon decommits. Actually, I think it was just the day later, Keon decommits, and then maybe a week later commits to Michigan, ultimately signs there, has a really nice career with the Wolverines. This past season, played a ton of snaps on defense at safety, over 600 snaps, and in the national title game was the second highest graded player on defense for Michigan. Now, I say all that to preface with this. Yes, you've got a really, really nice safety group. I love the safety group with Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen and Robert Spears-Jennings and the number of signings that you made in the 2024 cycle. The safety group looks locked and loaded for the future. It looks great. At the same time, you really only have Billy Bowman that's got a ton of significant starting experience. Yes, Robert Spears-Jennings and Peyton Bowen are on a nice ascension. At the same time, you want to have some veteran experience alongside Billy Bowman so you can take your defense to the next level. And I don't think that you can just turn a blind eye to a guy like Keon Sabb just because you do have Robert Spears-Jennings and Peyton Bowen. And again, that really, really nice group of safeties, part of the 23 and 24 cycles.
Well, I have no reason to believe that OU can't make the numbers work if they need to make the numbers work. If Keon Sabb does become a legitimate possibility for Oklahoma. You ran down the initial recruiting connection. Somebody decides to enter the transfer portal. That obviously is a nice place to start for Oklahoma, right? You have that established relationship with Brent Venables dating back, multiple years here. The player himself, man, obviously Keon Sabb, 360 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus this past season. Nice defensive grade, 82.1. The coverage grade, a little bit better than that, 82.6. And if you get into the raw nuts and bolts of the statistical numbers. 28 tackles a season ago, couple of interceptions, 4 pass breakups. So he's been productive. Did you mention that he was right there, highest graded player in the national championship game? So look, he's played in a big game, multiple big games, but in that national championship setting was one of the legitimate best players on the field for Michigan from a how he graded out standpoint. So I'm with you. If you can bolster what you've got going on in the safety room, look, I think Peyton Bowen's going to be a star. Billy Bowman is a star, and Sabb could also be a star along those couple of guys. And probably with the cheetah position, you'll find room everywhere in the secondary for those guys to go along with a Woody Washington, with a Gentry Williams. So if you can add Keon Sabb, then by all means.
Yeah, and I think you can afford to figure out where it all plays out down the road, because he'd be a spring addition, and you're going to have another kind of portal processing, so to speak, later in the spring and the summer. It wouldn't surprise me to see several more guys kind of turn over from the roster. It's a situation that's in flux, and Oklahoma wouldn't be pursuing his younger brothers, Amari and Xavier, Amari's a sophomore, Xavier's a freshman. They wouldn't be pursuing those guys as well, making offers on the same day that Keon enters the portal, if they didn't feel like they can make the numbers work for Keon Sabb. So let's talk about Amari. Again, a sophomore. He's not the biggest dude. He's 5'8", 165, 170, but he just looks like a natural athlete, a kid that you just get the ball into his hands somehow, some way, and he's going to make plays after the catch. He's got great lateral agility. He's got really good ball skills for somebody that is his size, does a great job tracking the ball in the air, and literally or legitimately plays both sides of the field. But I think he looks more like a wide receiver at the next level, or kind of a scat back running back type as well. So I like the player that's there. And then Xavier Sabb, I mean, the dude, he's already 6 foot 180 as a freshman. So there's a lot of potential growing still to do, but he looks like a bona fide, frontline wide receiver down the road as well.
And Keon, just for what it's worth, was a 4-star player according to the 247 Sports composite ranking, and ESPN had him there, Rivals had him there, On3 had him there, so he's a consensus 4-star guy. And with that in mind, I mean, obviously Amari and Xavier Sabb, they're sort of on college recruiters' radars, right? That was already true because of who Keon Sabb, their older brother, was. But yeah, Amari, man, he does look like he could be, on his huddle page, he's listed running back, wide receiver, cornerback. He does have some skills that I could see, if he grows a couple more inches, would be transferable to a cornerback position. He really catches the football well and looks athletic, breaking on routes or running routes. So probably either wide receiver or corner could be a realistic possibility for him at the next level. Xavier Sabb, you and I were talking before we started taping. His highlights, some of it, he's a freshman highlights this past year. Looks like he's playing against freshmen in his freshman highlights, and he makes these other freshmen look silly at times. The one play, it's probably 8 or 9 hats there ready to tackle him, and somehow, some way, he squirts out and runs into the end zone. So obviously he'll get tested more into the future, but they both look like rising big-time athletes, and I have no doubt that they'll get faster, more explosive. They already look like good athletes, Amari and Xavier, right now, but they'll continue to obviously get more explosive and maybe bigger. Like for Amari, if he's 5'8", 5'9" right now, maybe he grows a couple more inches in the next several years, and then that would be more transferable physically to the college level.
Yeah. Either way, Oklahoma's going to have an opportunity to make big headway in these recruitments. Now, they're going to be going up against the best of the best across the country for all three of these guys. Amari and Xavier, they've already got big time offers from, places like Alabama and Georgia and Michigan and, Penn State and Ohio State. Like, all the big time programs are coming after all three of these kids. So Oklahoma's going to have their work cut out for them if they want to add them. But it's going to come down to, relationships matter. And Brent Venables got a long-standing relationship with Keon Sabb. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. We'll be covering it here on Locked On Sooners all offseason, covering recruiting as well. But hey, one thing that's interesting about the way college football is trending right now is for the third straight season, scoring declined. What does that mean for the Oklahoma Sooners, especially as they head into the SEC? We'll discuss that next here on Locked On Sooners. And again, every episode of Locked On Sooners that has to do with recruiting is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all this while making the process easy and intuitive. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write jobs descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. College football is an ever-evolving sport. We're seeing it all the time, obviously off the field with NIL and coaching changes and transitions and the college football playoff expansion and realignment. But we're even seeing rule changes occur on the field that are kind of affecting the game. Most recently, it was the clock not stopping after a first down before the final 2 minutes of the halves. And that did have a little bit of an effect. There was a decrease on average in 4 plays per game across college football. But we're seeing a trend that scoring is down over the last few years. It's gone down. And according to CBS, that's the first time in a long time that scoring has dropped off like it has in recent years. So Josh, what are you making of all that? And what does this mean for the Oklahoma Sooners, and where are we heading with scoring in college football?
Theoretically, it should be good news for Oklahoma, because you have a defensive-minded head coach that is turning Oklahoma into a more, not that you're one-sided over another, but more defensive focus, right? A better defensive program. So it's natural to some degree that if you have a coach in Brent Venables that cut his chops as for a long period of time, most successful defensive coordinator, that maybe in some ways you would lean a little bit more defensive. But hey, I don't know that. I mean, I think Brent Venables is trying to take a across the board approach, but they're clearly making strides defensively in the way that they're recruiting. And now we just need to see those results continue to improve: scoring defense, total defense. So if you're telling me that offensive numbers across the board are going down, then with the man running the show in Brent Venables, I would say that maybe is good news for Oklahoma. My whole thing with it, John, is how much does this necessarily matter for OU in the SEC? Because I'm looking up, and I'll get the total offense numbers for you here in just a moment, but here's scoring offenses from last season inside the top 30 SEC teams. You got LSU, you got Oklahoma, you got Georgia. That's LSU 1, OU 4, Georgia 5. Texas was 15, Ole Miss 16th, Alabama 23rd, Texas A&M 24th, and Missouri 28th. So that's 8 top 30 scoring offenses last season in the SEC. So while defense across the board and is making a comeback, right, in part because of some of the rules changes, or offense is kind of going the other way a little bit, offense still pretty explosive in the SEC. And really, the SEC has gotten more that way, John, over the last 8-10 years, really since Alabama and Nick Saban decided, you know what, maybe we should start spreading things out a little bit too. It was sort of follow the leader for some in the SEC. And so I don't know. What do you make of all of it? I'm sort of mixed on it. I generally speaking, out of all of that jargon that I just tossed out there, it's a lot of word jambalaya. I guess my thought is Oklahoma defensive-minded head coach. I like that part of it if there's something to this, and yet I'm sort of the understanding that, well, wait a second, the SEC still has a bunch of really good offenses.
Yeah, the SEC does have a bunch of really good offenses. Obviously, we saw LSU and Jaden Daniels, play at an incredible rate this year. But what I do think is interesting is, the SEC is going to have really good defense as well. That's kind of typical, but we've seen the defensive stuff kind of flip a little bit. But I'm not really worried about where Oklahoma is going to land in this. I think they're going to have a really good offense. I think they're going to have a really good defense, and I do think what Chip Kelly said in the CBS Sports article on this, that football is kind of cyclical. I think that's just kind of part of what we're seeing right now is, okay, coaches going back to, okay, yeah, we're going to run this, high-paced offense, but we're going to run it in context. Yeah, we're going to run as many plays as we possibly can, but once we get that lead and we establish a significant lead, we're going to slow things down a bit and kind of take the foot off the gas and play more ball control football. I like the hybrid attack in a way, like, hey, when it's neutral game scripts or the game is within a one score, either way, we're going to go up. We're going to go up tempo, up tempo, up tempo. But then once we've really established our lead, we're going to slow things down a little bit and take a little bit of the pressure off our defense. And I do see like the defense is improving because you see a lot more of the athletes kind of going to that side of the ball. Whereas maybe before, a lot of your athletes were more and more on the offensive side. You're seeing these really, really good edge players that could play tight end, or they could be really good running backs, or whatever position you want to have them at. So I do think there's a little bit of a spread of the athleticism that's going across the board. And this, the rise of more and better defensive coaches across the country as well, whether it's Dan Lanning at Oregon, from the Kirby Smart, and then Kirby Smart from Nick Saban, and, all these really good defensive coaches. I think there's a little bit of a lot of different things, but for Oklahoma, I think it's going to be just fine.
And for Oklahoma, you have a head coach in Brent Venables that has publicly spoken about, we need to help our defense out. Stylistically, some of what we're doing, what you talked about, John, they understand that it all has to work in unison. So Oklahoma should be able to navigate this. And I think as a couple of guys that watch and follow this closely and probably over dissect sort of everything that happens or is said about Oklahoma football, whatever changes stylistically happen to the sport is not, well, okay, is that going to be good or bad for OU? Oklahoma needs to make it good for Oklahoma, right? Because it's Oklahoma football, and that's just the way it is. You need to be successful. And I think that they have the right leader in place that understands, okay, here's how we're going to navigate a situation where maybe it is less offensive in spots. Obviously, Oklahoma wants to be explosive offensively, right? And they want to limit everybody else from being explosive offensively. So probably not too much changes outside of you've cut out a couple of plays nationally, and we're seeing that trickle-down effect.
Yeah, and there might be more of that happening in the future. There's a look at maybe not stopping the clock on every out-of-bounds run. I imagine trying to look more a little bit like the NFL, where, again, when it's outside of the 2-minute warning, that you're going to just let the clock keep running. And there's even talk about putting in a 2-minute warning in college football. So that'd be an interesting element as well. Again, it looks like college football is trying to look a little bit more like the NFL in its game flow as well. And I know there's a lot of college football purists that don't like the changes that are happening, but change is inevitable. It is what it is. What is changing? Well, not really much changing, but it was a really, really good weekend for the Oklahoma Sooners from the diamond perspective. Maybe not so much on the hardwood. Let's discuss everything that went down this weekend in Norman and elsewhere. Coming up next on Locked On Sooners.
Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sports book, because right now, hey, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That again is $150 with any winning $5 bet. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. There's going to be a lot to get after once the All-Star break is over in the NBA. Maybe you've got some feelings about the Oklahoma City Thunder as this season starts making its way toward the playoffs. It's going to be fun. Postseason basketball, we know that's coming back to OKC in earnest, and that'll be great for everybody that follows along with us right here. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Well, Josh, the Oklahoma Sooners baseball team had a phenomenal weekend in Arlington, Texas. I say phenomenal because anytime you go and you beat a top 10 ranked team, that's pretty phenomenal. So Oklahoma lost their first game 4-2 to the Oregon Ducks. You know, it was one of those games where they were in a pretty good spot, and then a bases loaded situation in the 8th kind of got away from them a little bit and couldn't rally to come back in that one. But then got the big 5-1 win over Tennessee in extra innings, and then capped it off with a walk-off from Jackson Willits in the 9th inning against the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Yes, the younger Willits, Jackson Willits, delivering the walk-off knock versus Nebraska. That was great to see. Big-time rally for Oklahoma in the Arlington closer here for the Sooners to erase a 4-run deficit versus Nebraska. And it totally, you know, the Tennessee high, right, was great to take down a top 10 Tennessee team that was in the College World Series that is expected to go back perhaps to Omaha this season. So that alone was going to be nice to come out of Arlington with. And yet, if it was a 1-2 start to the season with, you know, that Tennessee game being the meat of the sandwich with losses surrounding it versus Oregon and Nebraska, wouldn't have felt so good. And yet, okay, now you walked it off with a big base knock, big rally, big knock from Willits, and then a great rally from Oklahoma. Jamie Hitt was sort of the final cherry on top of the pitching Sunday for Oklahoma. That was just fantastic. I think they had 41 some odd strikeouts over the course of the weekend as a staff. Jamie Hitt had 10 in this game versus Nebraska. The pitching across the board, the strikeout artistry was pretty amazing. It got started with Braden Davis on Friday, who honestly, the work behind the plate, the wild pitches were a killer for Oklahoma on Friday versus Oregon. And if you don't have those, then maybe we're talking about a 3-0 start to the season instead. But I thought Davis was good on Friday. Obviously, Brendan Gurdon was just magical the way he struck out the first 6 guys, maybe the first 7 guys he faced versus Tennessee. So he was pretty dazzling. The Witherspoon twins, those are a couple of additions to this team, John, from Northwest Florida State College. And Witherspoon squared was pretty magical on the bump for Oklahoma. Kyson Witherspoon was terrific in the Saturday win versus Tennessee. And then Lambert came in and slammed the door shut. And obviously they had the big extra innings explosion in the 10th. So all in all, man, I mean, you start off 2-1, you got to feel great about things for the baseball perspective.
Yeah, I think if you come away from that 1-2 with that win over Tennessee, you feel kind of okay, but you got to feel really good about it. Again, Nebraska, that's a pretty decent baseball program. Yeah, the Oregon one kind of got away from you a little bit, but then, yeah, that win over Tennessee, the cherry on the cake or on the Sunday. Oklahoma softball outscored their opponents 36-1 in 5 games through 4 shutouts, got contributions from just about everybody this weekend, whether it was, you know, Kelly Maxwell, Nicole May, S.J. Guerin got her first career win in her first career start for the Oklahoma Sooners. You know, Carly Keeney was really good again. Peyton Monticelli was really good. And then at the plate, I mean, everybody chipped in. Alyssa Brito had another home run. It's her 5th so far in the season. Tiara Jennings got going. She had a couple home runs over the weekend. Riley Boone, I think she had something like 6-7 RBIs in the 5 games down there in Lake Charles, like all of a sudden Riley Boone's an RBI producer for you now, which is crazy. Riley Ludlam continues to come through clutch. Again, Sydney Sanders, everybody was producing at a big time level. Kinsey Hansen had a rocket that is just like a Kinsey Hansen home run, just a line drive, barely reaches, gets over the fence. Not barely gets over the fence, but barely comes off the ground sort of a thing. But the bats are coming to life. Again, not the most daunting competition, but McNeese and Central Arkansas were both NCAA tournament teams last year that both performed well in the NCAA tournament last year.
And they want to try and show that they can be that type of program and team again against, well, the heavyweight champion, right? Or the whatever weight class champion you want to pick, right? Heavyweight champion, lightweight champion. I don't know a lot of boxing weight classes, I guess, but whatever. The defending 3-time national champion Oklahoma Sooners, you're trying to make a statement versus that program because they're the standard bearer in the sport. So it's just kind of fascinating, isn't it, that a night like the 3-0 win versus McNeese sort of sets off a panic and, hey, what's going on with this lineup? And yet it doesn't take long for the next day for Oklahoma to remind everyone, oh, okay, yeah, I think the lineup's going to be okay. But that's where Oklahoma has set the expectation for the program to where you score 2 in the first and then we don't hear from you until one final run in the 6th versus McNeese. And everybody's sort of saying, well, wait a second, what's going on with this offense? And that, of course, they're going to, heat the bats up in short order.
Yeah. If you're just on the podcast side of things, you didn't get a chance to see how big my eye roll was whenever Josh said people were panicking about a 3-0 win over McNeese. Man, we overreact to everything in our fan base, and we just got to relax. And that brings us to men's hoops. Man, I get it. This team was up 11 at one point against Kansas, against a team that in Kansas isn't the Kansas of old. They're not the juggernaut that they've always been. It's still Kansas. It's still Bill Self. It's still a very talented basketball team. Is it a frustrating and disappointing loss? 100%. Does that say anything about the direction of this program? No. We have seen what's been going on with this team all Big 12 season. It's an up and down team. They can get hot and they can play with just about anybody. If they can stay hot for 40 minutes, they can beat just about anybody. But the problem is that they're not often able to stay consistent from the field for 40 minutes. And that's when they run into trouble. And against a good Kansas team, if you can't shoot for 40 minutes where you have, a 3 for 19 stretch like you did in the second half, you're going to get beat. And I still think that this is a tournament team. I'm not concerned about that because I believe the strength of schedule for them is going to be enough, even though they might take several more losses. I think 18, 19 wins gets them into the tournament.
Because I was living that hashtag baseball life down in Arlington from Globe Life Field, I really admittedly was, gearing up for the broadcast, and I didn't get to watch this game. So I'm sort of a box score watcher here versus Kansas. I was shocked that it got us sideways as it went in the second half, just because, again, being a refresh the phone guy on Saturday through the first half, I was thinking, okay, this is going great. All right, cool. Billy Tubbs Day, we're going to get a big dub over Kansas. And then obviously Kansas flipped the script or Oklahoma flipped the script on itself in the second half. So it was disappointing that it played out the way that it did. I will say this, one of the coolest things that happened on the radio broadcast side, for Toby Rowland to welcome back John Brooks on the call, who was the play-by-play man, legendary OU play-by-play guy, and was the play-by-play voice for the Billy Tubbs era, was so cool for Oklahoma fans. So in the realm of darkness, there is still light.
That's right. And okay, women's basketball had their 9-game winning streak snapped on the road in Morgantown against the West Virginia Mountaineers, a top 25 team. They lost a close one. I still think this is going to be one of the better teams in Big 12 play for the rest of the season, but they got challenges. There have been signs at times during this winning streak of, okay, there are things that they need to continue to work on, turning over the ball, having cold stretches themselves. And at times that kind of caught up with them against West Virginia. I still, again, think this is a very talented team that's going to continue to play good basketball through the course of the season. And they've still got a good shot to win the Big 12 regular season title.
Yeah, they do. Frustrating to see the 9-game winning streak come to a close in Morgantown. But every once in a while, you're going to get got on the road. And it appears that obviously this weekend was that date. So they got to recalibrate things a little bit and go close this into the schedule out strong to repeat as Big 12 champions. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the legwork to get to this point. But you got to go seal the deal. You got to go close it. And unfortunately, they stubbed their toe this past weekend, and now they got to bounce back.
Yeah. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef. Follow myself at John9Williams. And the show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.